which is not supposed to be the case. They violated the National Arts Council Act. They violated their own meeting in their own council meeting where they resolved that there would remain an oversight structure. But they didn't do that. They went and became adjudicators and got paid for that. Now, amongst those 5 members, 2 of them are still around, and 3 are no longer with the National Arts Council. The 2 who remains, I have already written to them and I've given them time, reasonable time, a week, to state their side of the story, so that on an informed basis, I take a decision based on what they would have said. I must say here that part of what we are seeking legal advice on, is what happened to those who are no longer members. I know that we no longer have jurisdiction on them in terms of the council itself, but to the extent that there were funds involved there. Any fund, if there's any fund which has been received inappropriately, I've instructed the NAC that as they implement the recommendations of the forensic audit firm, they must ensure that, amongst others, if there are funds which were given to people inappropriately, those funds must be recouped. And that's what is going to happen. And we want to make this an example to anybody, any entity of our department, that they must know that people are going to be held accountable and will leave no stone unturned in ensuring that perpetrators are brought to book. And in this instance, I must say that the National Arts Council, having presented this report to me, what we are going to do is that those areas which fall within our purview, like the councils, are dealt with and dealt with effectively. But the matters which involve the management, senior management of NAC and so on, who are also cited in this report, it's the board, the council's task to take those ones to task. But it is important also to make a point that the National Arts Council, led by the chairperson, Princess Celentle Dlamini, and Advocate Makhosini Nkosi here, they will be able to take you blow by blow on what then. Because the most important thing out of this is that consequence management is going to be seen, to be felt by anybody who is involved. Because we cannot, as government, get the blame that we don't take care of our artists when we avail resources, when we avail funds for them. Somebody else decides to mismanage their funds. They belong to artists. We want each and every cent. That 285 million rands, each and every cent of that money should go to artists, and will go to artists. I'll give it to the National Arts Council to take us through on this report. and take questions after that if there are any questions. Chairperson, you can come to the floor. Thank you very much.
Excuse me. Good morning to the Honourable Minister and our colleagues from the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, and also my colleagues that are here with us from the National Arts Council as well. And also good morning to all the members of the various media houses that are represented here today and those that are also listening in. The Department of Sports, Arts and Culture entered into a memorandum of agreement with the National Arts Council for the delivery of the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program, which is what we call the PESP, or some others refer to it as the PESP. This was in October 2020. The responsibilities assigned and agreed to by the National Arts Council were outlined as follows. Number one, to ensure the implementation of effective, efficient and transparent financial management and internal control systems. Secondly, to use the allocation provided by the department exclusively and solely for the purpose of the project. Thirdly, to keep full and proper records of its financial affairs and do all things reasonably necessary to ensure effective implementation and completion of the project. The value of the project was 300 million, with 5% being retained by the National Arts Council for administration purposes. This then left 285 million aside to be kept through for project funding. And this project funding of 285 million was broken down as follows. Stream 1 was for job retention, and that allocation was 85 million. Stream 2 was for job creation, and that allocation was 200 million. The Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture appointed a new council on the 1st of January 2021, and shortly after the new council commenced its term, a National Arts Council external adjudication panel member wrote a letter to the Minister, which was then passed on to the National Arts Council, detailing allegations of mismanagement and maladministration of the PESP program. When we then received this letter from the Minister's office, this then resulted, with the new council, the new NAC council, halting all payments related to PESP to approved beneficiaries. And this was because we wanted to make sure that we conduct our own internal investigation regarding the allegations that had been brought forward to us. The National Arts Council then discovered a myriad of challenges, and these included, firstly, applicants that were approved and contracted for more funding than they had actually applied for. Secondly, over 55% of approved beneficiaries had not been allocated funding. So they had been approved, but they had not been allocated any funding. Thirdly, the National Arts Council had approved more beneficiaries than there was funding allocated. Driven by the commitment to ensure that public funds were going to be dispersed based on principles of fairness, equity, and administrative justice, the new council then applied the following principles: that all approved and compliant applications must receive a PESP grant. And the value in terms of the number of applicants that we're talking about that had not been allocated the funding, we were sitting at about 761 applications that had been left out and not allocated. So we then, with the new principles, ensured that all 761 must be included and be able to get the funding. So we will then talk about the totals in terms of the number of total applications later. Secondly, all compliant applicants approved must not receive more than what they had originally applied for. I think we've all heard in the media around some applications that had been submitted, and by the time they had received the first grant notification letters, it had not been the amount that they had actually applied for. It had been an amount that was more than what they had actually applied for. So we said we are not going to let that happen, and we're going to make sure that applicants will receive what they had originally asked for. Thirdly, approved projects must not exceed 2 million. However, what the National Arts Council considered was projects that created jobs at a national scale and have a national footprint would be considered for anything above 2 million. We had very few of those, so we didn't have to worry too much from that perspective. And then lastly, no organization could be funded for more than one project. After consultation with affected applicants, the National Arts Council then issued revised grant notification letters and contracts with adjusted guiding figures to ensure that all approved beneficiaries would receive funding. We then go into the independent forensic audit. Following multiple claims of mismanagement of the PESP program and the complaints from the creative sector, the National Arts Council members launched an independent forensic inquiry. On the 29th of July, the Council of the National Arts Council appointed an independent and highly reputable and leading international audit, tax and advisory firm, Mazars Forensic. We appointed them to conduct the independent forensic investigation into the implementation of the PESP. The investigation was completed and shared with the Minister on the 17th of September 2021, and this was followed by a formal presentation to the Minister and his colleagues at the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture on the 22nd of September 2021. The results of the investigation point out to wrongful doing, maladministration, and mismanagement in the process of implementing the PESP. The report further clearly identifies the individuals responsible and who will be held accountable for this maladministration. After a thorough process and independent inquiry, which lasted almost 12 weeks, the findings of the forensic investigation revealed some of the following findings. The first section is with regards to administrative findings. The investigators discovered a number of administrative failures attached to the PESP program as it relates to the following: failure to adequately resource the PESP project with competent staff, a lack of adequate oversight and review processes resulting in non-compliant projects being approved, failure to meet the timelines of the delivery of the PESP program, failure to manage and monitor the process such that accurate information in respect of approved applications were correctly captured on our grant management system. The second part is related to governance and financial findings. In addition, the auditors found multiple governance and financial mismanagement actions that included the following: contravention of Section 11 of the National Arts Council Act and failure to observe council resolutions, non-compliance with Section 57 of the PFMA in respect of ensuring adherence to the system of internal control and financial management, failure to take effective and appropriate steps to prevent irregularities in the adjudication process, including irregular spending, failure to provide financial oversight regarding the implementation of the PESP within the allocated budget of 285 million, resulting in overcommitment amount of 637 million, which was more than double the allocated budget of their PESP. Failure to ensure that a system of internal control was carried out, conflict of interest in respect to some former council members who were in the previous council who contravened Section 8 of the NAC Act. No new council members were found to be conflicted. The investigation confirmed that the findings of the state law attorneys that all council members appointed from the 1st of January 2021, whose organizations were funded from the PESP and had declared their applications, were not conflicted, as they were not part of the adjudication process of the PESP, which had been concluded by the 30th of December 2021. What is the way forward? Consequence management processes will be instituted against all those implicated in the report, and the process is being categorized into 3 sections: council members, senior management, and staff. All findings related to council members will be dealt with by the Minister's Office, as the National Arts Council does not have jurisdiction over them. Senior management, all findings related to senior management will be dealt with through an internal disciplinary hearing process by the Council of the NAC in accordance with the relevant legislation and company policies. Disciplinary action will be taken against the staff. To be taken against the staff will be managed by the NAC CEO's office, with an oversight role being played by the NAC Council, also in accordance with the relevant legislation and company policy. The next session is related to governance intervention and corrective measures to be taken by the new council. As the new council, we will continue to prioritize restoring strong internal processes and controls at the NAC. This will continue to be performed in commitment to promote good governance and to create an NAC that provides an impactful service to the sector. In our strides towards actively strengthening good governance and management, we have highlighted the following areas as critical in pursuit of this. Firstly, promoting the effectiveness of council oversight committees. We will be ensuring that the terms of reference are reviewed and that they are fit for purpose. We will be capacitating councillors to effectively discharge their fiduciary duties. The Audit and Risk Committee has been requested to evaluate the areas of our internal control environment that require urgent attention. The NAC will review all its financial management policies. And lastly, risk management is receiving urgent attention both at strategic and at operational levels, with a view to enhancing the risk maturity level of the organization. The current status of the PESP. In spite of the administrative challenges of the PESP program, the new council duly intervened based on the principles of fairness and administrative justice. This intervention has yielded the following positive achievements. To date, out of the 285 million that has been put to us to disperse to the sector, 272 million has been distributed to artists and organizations, and this constitutes 96% of the total distribution of all PESP funding. The remaining balance of 4% is still being distributed as beneficiaries continue to submit all required reporting documentation. 1,309 applicants have benefited from the PESP program, and this has yielded more than 20,000 job opportunities in the creative sector during a very trying time. In conclusion, I would like to just say that we are very, very comforted by the fact that the investigation found that all the funds, the 285 million, has been accounted for. So there has been no missing funds at the NAC. We have accounted for it. We have dispersed to date the 272 million, and we are confident that the balance of the 4%, given all the required documentation, reporting documentation, will be dispersed on time as well. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Princess. And that was, of course, the chairperson of the NAC, Princess Celenhle Dlamini. Now, I'd like to open it up to the floor. Ish. I think it's okay to remove my mask because all health protocol has been observed. This is the part where we get to our Q&A session, where we will be taking your questions via WhatsApp, and we will allow for our panel to also feedback and give their responses as well. Thank you. And just as a reminder before we get to the questions, is we've over and above the Honourable Minister Nathi Mthethwa, we have the chairperson of the NAC, Princess Celenhle Dlamini, as well as the NAC Councillor Advocate Makosini Nkosi, who's sitting on the far left in that beautiful navy suit, as well as Mr. Spusiso Tsanyane, who's our Acting Director in Public Entities, Oversight and Interface in the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. Over to you, Ignatius.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one question so far from Jocelyn Abraham, who's a freelance journalist, and asked what's going on with the $100 million stimulus package for artists. That's the only question that I have for now.
I'm not sure if that question is directed at the minister.
Maybe
Let's take a few questions. Let's take about 3. I see a hand up. Sir, please introduce yourself. Give us your name as well as your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Govin Whittles from ENCA. I have a few questions here. Who are the 5 National Arts Council members who are found to have been implicated in this report? Then how much of the money that was allocated in contravention of the National Arts Council Act and the PFMA? Mr. Chairman, I have quite a bit. Should I continue with all of this?
One more, please, just one.
All right.
Oh, sure. Minister says I must let you go. If minister says you must go, then go.
Thank you so much. I'll
Take it and run.
Thank you so much. So who are
Okay.
the 5 National Arts Council members who were implicated in this report? Will the 3 National Arts Council members who are no longer part of the council be pursued by the criminal justice system, or what consequences are there for them? And are you at liberty to say who these people are? How much of the money that was allocated has been affected by the contravention of the National Arts Council Act and the PFMA? And then how much of this money, if any of it, is earmarked for recovery from any artist that received relief? And just a clarity-seeking question, does the National Arts Council consider the money that has been distributed to have been distributed correctly or to the correct people? And if it says that some of the processes were in contravention of the Act and the PFMA, does that mean artists who legitimately applied for relief and received relief that didn't follow the correct process would have to give that relief money back? Thank you.
All right. We'll take one more from the floor, Mama. What is your name and who do you represent, and what is your question?
Tsakoma Afi from Newsroom Africa. I've got a few questions around what you've just spoken about, but also a few questions around sports. I don't know if I can ask the sports questions as well.
We're not here for sport, but let's start with your 2 questions. Yes, ma'am. First to Minister, you will guide me who I should call onto the floor first. I think I should call onto the chairperson first, if that's okay. All right. No, I'm going to ask you, chairperson, to come to the front. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to be doing up and down today. Exercise, like Minister always says. Let's walk.
Thank you very much. The very first question that was asked in terms of what has happened to the 300 million, 272 million of the 285 that was earmarked for disbursement is in the hands of the artist. So all that is now left is basically the balance, which the 272 million constitutes 96% of the total disbursement. The 4% is going to be distributed over the next. I'm sure. I think we're closing PESP within the next month. So we are hopeful that at least when PESP program closes, we would have then completely dispersed all the 285 million. The 5% was for administration fees, so that was then retained by the National Arts Council. I don't know whether that's answered the question sufficiently. Sir, are you happy? Okay, all right. Okay. What was the last question, Minister, by the way? Oh, okay. The organizations, yes, the ladies asked about organizations that had then received more money. What transpired was more money. What transpired was we managed to halt the payments at very, very, very early stage before payments were actually dispersed to those artists. So we have only a few artists that are actually sitting in that category, and I think I can't remember the exact figure in terms of what the figure was, but it was very, very, very small amount. And with those, we are not going to be going back to request the money back from the artists, because that was not their fault. At the time that and at that point in time, we had not discovered the mismanagement and the maladministration. So I hope that answers that one. Minister, I think you will talk about the 5 council members and the 3 council members here.
I think there's another one from Govan, which thank you. No, Govan, I won't be able to give you the names now, especially because, as I said earlier on, I've just written to the ones who are still with NAC, 2 of them, giving them an opportunity. So let's just give them that time to put their side of the story, so that they don't come back and accuse us to have gone ahead of ourselves and so on. So that's one. But what really is the mischief? The mischief here is that council members, like any board, their task is oversight over the entities they are leading, or they are appointed to lead. That's their task. It's oversight. In other words, they are more at the strategic and policy level as a executing authority. They are not accounting authority. Now, if a board or a council decides to blur the lines and go to operations and become adjudicators, when they in fact supposed to oversee adjudicators, they become adjudicators. And because of that, they get their honorarium as members of the council, which is funds due to them, but they also get money through adjudication. That's what we said when we were talking about lapse of oversight and the blurring of lines. That's the mischief will be curing to them. What I said earlier on is that the legal process we are engaged in is the advice on what is to be done, because quite clearly they got money misappropriately. They're not supposed to be getting that money, because they were not supposed to be in that space to start with. They were supposed to stay put in what they are appointed to do as council, to oversee the entire organization. That's the mischief, and that's committed, and that's what they would be expected to account on. So that's where I leave it. Or maybe before. No, don't go ahead. Maybe before Advocate Nkosi comes in, one of the things we sympathize with artists in particular and the public generally, that the 12 weeks the chairperson of the NAC has referred to of this investigation process has left people in the dark. People didn't know what was happening. We also didn't want to, interfere with the forensic process. Now that it's out of their hands, and they've given recommendations, and we've said to the NAC they must follow through those recommendations, which they've started to do. But I've also said, just to keep the public abreast of what is happening, every 2 weeks, in fact twice a month, NAC is going to report to me how is the disciplinary process going with the senior management and everybody else, and in turn we will be informing the public about what is happening until the finalization of this process, which we think that it shouldn't take long to be finalized, because people are known now, they've been mentioned. All what we need to do is to get on to implement the recommendations and the findings coming from the forensic audit. Advocate Nkosi is here responding to some questions.
Thank you, Minister. I will respond to the questions raised by Gavin. The amount that was wrongly allocated, as the Minister has indicated, for now we can't be ahead of ourselves. As and when the process unfolds, you will get to know exactly the minute details of what we'll be doing. As to how much was earmarked for the artist that was misappropriated, or misallocated rather, the amount that we are talking about here are divided into two. The 5% that was meant for the administration, and the 285 million that was meant for the artist. Out of the 285 million meant for the artist, not even a single cent was affected in terms of it being wrongly allocated for a purpose other than the PESP project. Does the NAC consider the money disbursed to be given to legitimate applicants being recoverable? We believe that whatever that has happened was not done fraudulently. In fact, it was because of the weaknesses in the control system and the incompetent manner in which the project was implemented. For now, we have no reason to believe that there were fraudulent transactions that were done. In the case, for instance, where an application has to fall by the wayside on the administrative compliance, then it found itself being evaluated and finally approved. We believe that there were weaknesses in our control system, in our internal control system, and that is what we are actually going to be dealing with that. That also then answers the question whether we are going to be pursuing people through our criminal justice system. One thing that the Minister has actually instructed us to do is to recover the money where we have to recover. And we want to assure you, Minister, we are definitely going to recover the money. We leave no stone unturned. Every person who benefited wrongly, particularly those that were part of the ANC, those that are responsible for us as a board, I can assure you that we are going to get that money back. For now, we have no reason to involve the police because there is nothing before us that suggests that there were fraudulent activities being involved. However, should we, as we go forward, discover that there was fraud that was perpetrated, we will not hesitate to involve the police. And we will keep on updating and informing the media, as the Minister has indicated, on specific timelines as indicated by the Minister as to the developments regarding people that are being pursued through disciplinary processes, both at top management level and also within the NAC, where the CEO will be directly handling those matters, and us as the board will be playing a very, very close oversight to ensure that those matters are dealt with effectively and also that they are finalized within a very short space of time. I think those are the questions that I had to respond to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there are no further questions, I see a hand up. Yes, sir. We will take one or two more questions. I know Minister will reprimand me and say, take them all, because we are here to provide clarity today and to ensure that we bring closure to this matter. Yes, sir. Reintroduce yourself for those who've just joined and who you represent, please.
Thank you so much. It's Gogan Little once again from ENTA. Minister, just on the specifics now, so you're looking at these council members who are adjudicating instead of doing oversight, and you say you've written to the two council members who are still there, asking for their responses. In the report that you have, is there a response from them? Or were they interviewed, the ones that took part in it? And do you, at this moment, have any explanation from these council members on why they decided to adjudicate instead of only keeping to their oversight mandate? And then I'd just like to find out whether the forensic report investigated at all whether the artist who secured relief through the adjudication by these council members had been in previous contact with the council members, and whether there was any collusion to ensure that their applications were approved, or whether the report didn't investigate this, and if it did investigate, were there any findings in this regard? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Govan. I'm going to take one more final question. I see Ignatius, do you have a question on your side? I'll come to you in just a second, and then we will wrap up the engagement Q&A session. Yes, ma'am, please reintroduce yourself, your network, and your question, please.
It's Nathi again from the Newsroom Africa. I just want a bit of clarity. So these are former council members. They are not still part of the NAC council. They are former council members. 3 of them are former council members. And the other 2 are still part of the council. Okay. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much. Ignatius, over to you.
Yes, Master Chaba. I have just a couple of questions. First one from Haupaleli from Chakaranda FM. She asked, with the off-allocation that was done, does this mean not enough funds were given to the for this purpose? She says, I am trying to wrap up my head around how that happened. The report talks about irregular spending. How much of the funds were spent irregularly? And can the NAC take us into confidence how this money was spent irregularly? And then the next question, I think also Govan spoke about this, asked about this. The report also talks about conflict of interest in respect of some former council members who were in the previous council, who contravened Section 8 of Subsection 5 of the NAC Act. Who are these members and how they in contravention of the Act? And the last questions from Patience from Sowetan newspaper. What were the terms of reference of the investigation? Thanks, Ms. Shaba.
Thank you very much, Ignatius.
All right, I will hand over to... All right. We will hand over to the advocate to address the first few questions, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you once more, Master Chaba. The question by Gavin. Coincidentally, Minister, this morning while we were sitting at the holding room, this is the very same question I raised with the interim CEO. We all know that when you are doing a forensic investigation, you want to deal with facts. And what is raised by Gavin here is beyond your tangible facts that you would find on documents or when you interview people that are trying to hide something. For now, we have to do the following, Minister. I'm going to suggest this to the NAC. Let's look at all those applications that were supposed to be disqualified, but they were approved. We'll look at the amounts, and then we will also then pick some of them and do a further investigation that will directly address the issue that you're raising, Kevin. Because if, for instance, a person was not supposed to be approved for 2 million gets approved for 2 million, you need to ask yourself a reason. Why would I assist a person to get 2 million when there's nothing for me, for instance? Was that person so lucky? So those are the issues that now we are going to look into, and into specific details. And we'll keep on reporting whatever that we discover that needs to be reported. But that is a very good question to be asked in the light of the findings of the report. The question from the Jacaranda, does it mean not enough funds was given to the NAC? We know, we work on budgets. If you allocated a particular budget, you need to do whatever that you need to do within that budget. Just like service delivery, the government doesn't have the budget to do service delivery in one financial year, even in the next 5-6 financial years, but we prioritize. So now what is happening here, we were given 300 million. So all that we had to do as NAC, we had to ensure that we do an appropriate review of the projects, and those that come out best are allocated funding, but within the sum of 300 million. There was a lapse in that we approved more than 300 million, and that is where the problem started. Had we been vigilant enough to say on daily basis or each time the council sits to approve these applications, we have a clear barometer that now we are left with so much we cannot go beyond this, we would have avoided these challenges that we ended up facing. So it was not a question of not enough money being given. There was the issue of irregular spending or expenditure. We need to appreciate as to why do we view this as being irregular, as opposed it to being fruitless or wasteful. It's not fruitless or wasteful, but it was irregular in the sense that projects that were not supposed to get to the stage of review ended up being reviewed. Not only being reviewed, but also being approved. Yet they did not meet all the specific requirements that compliant wanted them to meet. Hence we are saying that it was irregular, because if they were non-compliant and they ended up being approved, that was highly irregular. So let's not confuse the issue of it being irregular as if there was no benefit at the end of the day that came out of it through the artist getting the money and using that money for whatever purpose that they had applied it for. It is in that context that we are saying it was irregular. There was this other one of conflict of interest. Chair, would you... can't remember the context it was raised. You'll respond to that, Minister. Oh, thank you very much.
I'm going to just read out the terms of reference as requested. Firstly, to determine if there were any irregularities or inconsistencies in the management, adjudication, and approval of PESP applications received from the sector. Secondly, to determine if there's any culpability with regards to those entrusted with PESP application and administration processes. Thirdly, to determine if there has been gross negligence, misconduct, or dereliction of duty in respect of the CEO tasked with the management of the PESP process. To determine if there has been gross negligence, misconduct, or dereliction of duty in respect of the CFO tasked with the management of the PESP process. Determine if there has been gross negligence, misconduct, and or dereliction of duty in respect of the previous council tasked with the management of the PESP process. Determine if there's been gross negligence, misconduct, or dereliction of duty in respect of any of the NAC staff, management, panel members, council members tasked with the management of the PESP process. Performing a reconciliation on PESP-related funds and confirming cash on hand. And lastly, providing a comprehensive report with recommendations for council's consideration and action where possible. Thank you.
Well, once more, I will plead with Gavin and the question asked that let's give this process its life. It's important that we do that. I can answer what they said and what they didn't say in this investigation, forensic investigation. It's better that people do not get an idea that they would be having a kangaroo court against them without their consent. As I said, we have given reasonable time for them to give us their side of the story, and from there we will then be able to be well informed from an informed basis to chart the way forward from there. So I think we should leave it at that. 300 million rands was given to NAC. And this 300 million rands, 285 of this was supposed to go to artists and 15% administration, about 5% administration to NAC. Out of 285 million rands which was supposed to go to artists, to date, 272 million rands were dispersed and were given to artists. So they are in artist pockets as we speak, which constitute 96% of 285 million rands. Now the 4% is what NAC is still dealing with in terms of application. Once that 4% come to stream, the entire 285 million rands would have been accounted for. So there is no cent out of 285 million rands which is not being accounted for. What has happened is that in the process of artists getting their funds, people who were part of that process, some of them adjudicating, were not supposed to be part of that process. So if anybody asks what happened to the 285 million rands, is that most of that is now in the pockets of the artists. There's no money disappearing. There are people who got money who were not supposed to get money. And I'm coming here specifically on the issue of council members who were not supposed to get a cent, and they got some of that money. But there hasn't been any fraud committed so far, unless there's something else which comes. No fraud which made money to disappear. Money has not disappeared. 285 million rands is going to be accounted for at the end of the day. The inappropriate benefiting of those funds, that's what we are dealing with. But none has defrauded PESP. Even people who are mentioned there, the list of people who are mentioned there, have not. There's been lack of oversight from the bodies which were supposed to do oversight, that is the former council, also NAC itself, of people who were part of the adjudication process and so on, who were not supposed to be there in the first place. That's what we are talking about. But there's no cent which is not going to be accounted for on these 285 million rands. I'm responding to the question, what happened to 300 million rands? That's what happened. The bulk of that money is in the pockets of artists as we speak, 96%. NAC is finalizing 4% to go to the pockets of the artists as well. What has changed is those people who had asked for 2 million rands and were promised 4 million rands, they did not get that 4 million rands because they were not supposed to get it in the first place. They didn't get it. So those things happened, but currently, as we stand here, we are confident that the process of discipline and everything else will take place, will be fast-tracked. We will be monitoring that process. We couldn't monitor the forensic process because it would have been interfering. But this one, from the forensic, the findings will be able to monitor their implementation. Consequence management is going to happen. And that's where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you so much to our panelists. This doesn't bring us to the end of our briefing. We have some questions from a specific publication. I will hand over to you, Sizimasa, our Head of Communications at the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture.
Thank you very much, Master. I received an email from Simniki with Tataneni, the reporter from The Citizen yesterday. It says, I would like to relay the following question to the Minister regarding the recent handing over of a report into the National Arts Council regarding the handling of 300 million. The DA alleges it's been 14 days and they have yet to receive parliamentary replies to questions on this. When will the forensic investigation be publicly made available? What are the terms of reference of the investigation that has been responded to? Will this include forensic accounting? Those are the questions.
Thank you very much.
We are not forensic investigators. DA was ahead of itself. And we explained to all and sundry that the forensic investigation is on. And we couldn't interfere with that process. It's now complete. And it's giving us findings. It's giving us recommendations of what needs to happen. That's where we are now. So tell them that's where we are. We are in the process of instituting disciplinary hearings to those senior members of NAC. The council's task is just that, to ensure that that is followed through. We further said,
Sports and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa, they are unrelenting and stating in no uncertain terms that
findings, the recommendations and their implementation. This is where we are now. So we'll be implementing that. We'll be briefing to NAC, ourselves. We'll be briefing the public as we move what is happening. We've started now. We've started. I've said already the 2 members who are still in the council have the letters with them now from me. We've given them that period, reasonable period, and we then are going to get a response from them, and the reasonable period here is 7 days. And then we'll get a response from them, then we'll see then what to do. But the totality of the members, former council members, having been involved in processes of adjudication and having been paid for that. That's the legal advice we are getting. What do we do with those monies they got as adjudicators in the area they were not supposed to be in, whilst at the same time getting honorarium as an oversight body? So that's where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of our proceedings today. I'd like to thank the chairperson of the NAC, Princess Celenhle Dlamini. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the NAC Councillor Advocate Makhosini Nkosi. I'd also like to thank our Acting Director in Public Entities, Oversight and Interface, Mr. Spusiso Tsanyane. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you to members of the media. So for those of you who have any further questions or would like to further engage or need clarity on anything, we would implore you to have a look at our website or have a look at the statements or the advisory. For my details, Master Chaba Kumalo, or the details of our head of comms, Ms. Zimasa Velapi, for any further questions. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. On that note, we appreciate your time. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
You'll probably